Look at the universe. Everything moves. But what holds this movement together? Motion without a center is not life, it is catastrophe. There is a force in the cosmos that moves everything, but never moving at all. It is a fundamental truth that the ancient Greeks understood. Everything that changes depends on something that does not. And they did something shocking with this realization. They placed a silent, unmoving goddess at the absolute center of reality. Not as a decoration, not as a mere symbolism for something, for the home of something, but as the metaphysical condition that makes existence possible. They placed Hestia at the beginning and the end of every ritual, every home, every city, and the cosmos itself. Hestia's name, hidden in her name, lies the bridge between being, motion, and the very center of our consciousness. When we lose this center, our thoughts scatter, our emotions pull us apart, and our lives lose their coherence and become a series of mechanical accidents. Hestia is the principle that holds the mind together while the whole world storms around it. She is the Krateon styrigma, which means the great support of the soul. And without Hestia, neither Apollo's clarity nor Dionysus's ecstasy can ever find a place to stand. The etymology of essence, being and impulse. To understand Hestia, we must look at the Greek word for essence, which is ousia. But be careful here. The word essence, from the Latin essentia, shares the same root as esia and estia. They all come from the verb esti. It is, to be. Being, the very essence of all is being. To be. So in the Cratylus, Plato reveals that the word had two ancient forms, each revealing a different face of the goddess. Esia. Esia is the pillar of being. Derives from the verb esti, which means it is. And as we said here, Hestia is the goddess of being itself. She is the very foundation, the ontological ground that allows anything to stand. This is why the Greeks were saying Hephaestus archeste, which means always the starting point is Hestia. Before any ceremony, any procedure, building a city, or even thinking a thought, there must be first a place for it to exist. Hestia is that isness. Ousia, the impulse of motion. Plato gives us a second explanation from the word osis. Osis meaning a push or an impulse, acceleration. So this suggests that essence is not just something static like a floor or something. It is the force that initiates movement. And this is the great paradox here. Hestia is the unmoving center that generates all motion. She is the stay, Hestia, that provides the push, ousia. She is the stillness at the very heart of Heraclitus's fire. To understand how Hestia functions, look at the stars. Our entire galaxy is a massive dance of billions of suns, and everything is in motion. Yet the galaxy orbits at a fixed center, a point of such immense gravity and stability that holds all the other spiral arms to their place. And the galaxy is part of a cluster, and the cluster moves around yet another great attractor. Movement is only possible because there is a point that always remains. Think of a simpler everyday phenomenon, a vortex in a basin of water. The water spins violently, creating a powerful cone of force, but the very center of the whirlpool has a hole. It is stillness. If that still point disappears, the whole vortex collapses. The Pythagorean Hestia, the central fire, Philolaos, and Proclus. This physical reality leads us directly to the Pythagorean understanding of the cosmos. Long before Plato, the Pythagoreans spoke of a central fire at the heart of the universe. Philolaos called it the house of Zeus, the altar and measure of nature. And the fire does not wander or consume, it stabilizes, it gives the cosmos a center. So this is Hestia on the cosmic scale, the very metaphysical axis from which harmony radiates. So if Hephaestus is the fire that shapes the world, Hestia is the fire that holds the world. As the Neoplatonist Proclus would later explain, every level of the universe requires a center. Without such a center, nothing can be coherent. Hestia is that center for the cosmos. So she is the grounding of order, the stable presence without which form collapses into chaos. In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates describes a procession of the gods through the heavens. Zeus leads the way on a winged chariot, followed by an army of deities and daemons ordered in 12 divisions, and all moving in a great celestial dance. But Socrates notes one striking detail, that for Hestia alone abides in the dwelling of the gods, while the other primary gods move, act, and govern the cycles of change, Hestia remains seated. And this is not passivity, it's metaphysical necessity. In the architecture of the cosmos, if the center moves, the world ends. Hestia remains at the unmoving axis so that the world can keep turning. She's the threshold between the stillness of the one and the motion of the many. And this was not something that just stayed in the text of the philosophers. It seeped into the very DNA of Greek culture. Even today, in the most remote villages of Greece, you will find grandmas who insist on keeping a Kandili, which is a lamp burning 24/7 at home. And if you ask them why, they might not give you a lecture on Plato. They will say it is για το καλό, which means for the good of the house, or simply because their mother and their grandmother did it before them. But what they are unconsciously preserving is this connection to Hestia. They are maintaining the still point of the household, ensuring that the sacred fire never goes out, because they know instinctively that if the center is lost, the family, the whole, and the soul will begin to drift. So whether it is the fire in a humble little kitchen, or the sacred altar in the Prytaneum of a city, or even the central fire of the stars, Hestia is the anchor that gives the cosmic dance its meaning. Without the immovable seat, there is no order. There is only a dizzying, directionless drift. The psychological hearth, the tragedy of the scattered mind. Let's stop pretending now that we understand this principle. Most of us do not have a center. We have a vacancy. The ancient world knew that Hestia is the krateon styrigma, the great support that holds the soul together. But in our modern life, this support has totally collapsed. And this is where the teaching of George Gurdjieff meets the very mystery of Hestia. Gurdjieff famously stated that the man is a machine, and his greatest tragedy is that he is not one with himself. We think we have a permanent I, but we are actually a chaotic house full of unruly servants, and the master is nowhere to be found. One I decides to change his life at 8 o'clock in the morning. Another I is hungry at 2 o'clock and destroys everything the first I built, and so on. This is the psychological state of diaspasis, diaspora, the scattering. It is the exact opposite of Hestia. So, when the inner hearth is called, your attention is not directed, it is dragged. You are a puppet of your own external impressions, a comment on social media, a sudden fear, a passing desire. Each one comes and pulls the string, and you react. A person without Hestia in them does not decide, they oscillate. They call this freedom or spontaneity, but it is actually a mechanical life. It is the Dionysian fragmentation without the Hestian container. Most people do not have a center. They borrow one, and they borrow this elusive center from emotions, from opinions, from desires, from fears, from trends, from social media, from identities, and so on. And whatever happens to be the loudest becomes who they are for the moment. This has nothing to do with psychology. This is mechanical life. Apollo to Hestia, the undivided mind. This is why Apollo's clarity depends on Hestia's presence. We explored in a previous episode that Apollo is Aplus, the non-plural, the undivided. He represents the vision that sees the truth as one. But where does this vision stand? Hestia provides the place where the undivided mind can abide. Apollo reveals the light, but Hestia is the vessel for the flame. To find your inner Hestia is what Gurdjieff called self-remembering. It is the act of returning to that still point in the middle of the storm. It is the moment you stop being that I that is angry and you become the center that observes the anger. You become the Hestia, the being that remains stable within the osis, the impulse that is pushing against you. And once you achieve that, you become the osis. You must find the inner hearth before you can shape your outer world. You must light, so to speak, the Kandili of your own awareness, like the grandma, before the light of Apollo can illuminate your life. First the hearth, then the light, and then the fire. Hephaestus and Hestia, the two faces of fire. In the Greek tradition, fire is not a single element, it has two modes of existence, embodied in the relationship between Hephaestus and Hestia, and together they are the two complementary forces that sustain both the universe and the human soul. Hephaestus represents the fire that descends into matter. He's the divine craftsman, the god of the forge, the master of technology and transformation. So he's the fire that shapes, he moves, he strikes, he creates, he represents the world of the senses and the very intelligence of motion itself. Hestia, however, is the fire that centers. She's the stabilizing flame that remains at the core, providing the axis upon which Hephaestus can then work. While he forms the cosmos, She holds the cosmos. Think of a potter's wheel. Hephaestus is the hands of the potter moving the clay, applying the pressure, and changing the shape. Hestia is the fixed vertical axis of the wheel. If the axis wobbles, the potter's work is totally destroyed. Without this still point of Hestia, the creative craft of Hephaestus becomes chaotic and destructive. In your own life, so to speak, Hephaestus is your ingenuity, your career, your creativity, your daily labor. But Hestia is your presence. So he is your doing and she is your being. If you are all about doing and no being, then you will burn out. You will be a craftsman with no home and a builder with no building foundations. So the ancients remind us that you can only shape the world effectively if you have a center that the world cannot shake. The final mystery, the threshold of the One. As we are finishing this video, we must understand this thing. The world moves because the center does not, but we must understand that Hestia is not the One. Across all the Greek tradition of the Pythagoreans and the Pythagorean harmonies, the Platonic dialogues, the Orphic hymns, we encounter a recurring truth. Hestia is the threshold. She is the first reflection of unity within the material world. The One, the monad, to en in Greek, lies beyond being, beyond motion and beyond the cosmos. And Hestia is the gateway. She's the anchor that mirrors the divine unity here in our lives. So she's not the source, she's the mirror of the source, not the One, but the bridge towards the One.
The Greek One versus Abrahamic creation. In Greek ontology, to en, the One, doesn't create from nothing. It doesn't leave a void, it overflows. It is an infinite emanation, a mathematical procession from the monad to the many and back. Think of it not as a craftsman making some kind of a tool, but as a neural network of light where the source remains still while its abundance generates the cosmos.
Only an unmoving center can generate true motion, and only a stable axis can remember that unity precedes it. So this is Hestia, the Krateon styrigma, the great support that gathers our scattered eyes and points them to the absolute. Episode 13, Dionysus, the god who breaks the boundaries of the self. Now that we have kind of understood the hearth, Hestia, we have to go deep. Hestia gives the world coherence. She gathers, she holds, she stabilizes. But there is another force in the Greek world, one that does not gather, but breaks open. One that does not stabilize, but dissolves, and his name is Dionysus. Where Hestia creates unity, Dionysus shatters it. And where Hestia gives form to the self, Dionysus tears that form apart. And here is the danger that the ancient world understood very, very well, with terrifying clarity. Dionysus does not free everyone. Without Hestia, without a center, his arrival does not lead to higher unity. It leads to madness. It leads to possession, to a fragmentation from which there is no return. Hestia is the condition that makes Dionysus survivable. She is the vessel and he's the wine. If the vessel is cracked or missing, the wine is totally lost and the soul is drowned. The next episode is Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, dissolution, and the most dangerous passage in the transformation of the self.